Hey, what is going on, guys? In today's video, we're doing a full EZFN Season 4 settings guide, and we'll go over the video settings, the game settings, and controller settings all in one video. Normally, I'll split that into two, but because there's not that many settings available to you in Season 4, I don't think that's necessary. Of course, there's timestamps for each of the three categories if you'd like to see a particular setting, and with that, let's get started. Okay, so in terms of graphic settings, it's really going to be down to you to decide how is the game more fun for me? Is it more fun to be super competitive? Is it more fun for me to have max graphics to make the game look great? Or is it somewhere in between? I'm going to kind of do some advice based on those three options. If you want to be as competitive as possible, I recommend, if your PC can run it, to set view distance to epic and everything else to low. You may be asking why you don't set your view distance to near. The reason why is because although players may not necessarily render further away, player-built structures and the environment will render further out. And the environment can actually be really important because if, say, for example, you walk into Tilted Towers and you have epic render distance, the buildings will render in sooner and you may see that the entirety of, say, hotel has been destroyed. Okay, then you can probably denote that, or assume that, okay, they probably have explosives and there's probably a major fight that went on there. If you had it on near, you have to get a lot closer to get that information. If you can't run it at epic view distance, it's fine to run it lower. It's not the biggest disadvantage, but it is helpful. You can always also lower 3D resolution to a lower percentage if you're having problems. I'd recommend everything else on low as none of these settings will help you. I recommend you turn VSync off as VSync can introduce additional input latency which you do not want, and motion blur you want that off as there's no reason to make your enemies more blurry. If you want to go for a middle ground, I recommend you set these settings to epic but keep shadows off. Because these settings, while they may hurt your FPS a little bit, they don't really give you that much of a gameplay disadvantage. Really, it's shadows where you're getting that huge gameplay disadvantage because you're making it a lot easier for your enemies to hide. So this is how I recommend you configure it if you want to be a middle ground. And if you want to play on max graphics with motion blur on and VSync, if that makes the game more fun for you, more power to you. Don't let me stop you. Play it the way that's more fun for you. Let's move on to our game settings or general settings. So obviously server, you want to set the closest one. Right now, I believe only NA servers are online for Season 4, but EU servers should be online for the full launch, so set whatever is going to give you better ping. NA players, though, you may still want to play EU just because there's more players. Okay, let's move on to controller sensitivity. This is a game of balancing, do you want to have better aim or do you want to have better building? The lower you set this, within reason, 1 is not good, but if you're at like 4 or 5, that's going to really help you with L2 at long range. Because to use L2 effectively, often what you want to be doing is aiming while hip firing at long range, getting as close as possible, then tapping L2 and firing. Having a lower sensitivity will help you a lot. Because there is no dead zone control in Season 4, there is generally a very high dead zone for controllers, so it's very hard to aim at long range. This will really help you. But building will be painfully slow at 5.5. So if you want to optimize for builds, go 10.10. For me, I stick at 7.7. I think that's a pretty balanced configuration, slightly biased towards aiming. It's really going to be up to you to decide where this middle ground lies for you. Or maybe you just go extreme to one end. One thing to keep in mind is that you have to have a whole number sensitivity. So there's really not that many choices, honestly. You know, it's going to be kind of rough because if you had 0.65, you have to round. So just keep that in mind. ADS sensitivity, it's a very similar situation of balancing out medium range and close range aim versus long range aim. If you're spamming L2 in, out like this very rapidly, you're going to want to have this as high as possible because you're alternating between base, ADS, base, ADS, base, ADS, right? When you're spamming L2. So having a sensitivity that's higher will make that difference less. It'll make it easier to aim while spamming L2. But at a certain point at long range, maybe 150 to 200 meters, L2 won't work. And you're going to want to have the lowest ADS sensitivity so you can actually still aim even without L2. So it is a compromise game. I set it at 0.68, which generally I think is biased slightly more towards L2. It's going to be up to you to decide where that middle ground or an extreme lies. It's up to you to decide. Scope sensitivity, well, yes, you can L2 with the Scope DR. I have done it a few times. The Scope DR is not very good. That's not really relevant. Really just optimize the scope sensitivity for how you like to use snipers. That's really up to you. You're not going to be using L2 with snipers realistically. So focus on just making your sniper aim better. Don't worry about L2 with scope sense. Okay, Let's move on to some control options. Sprint by default should be on in Season 4. So this is not really a concern. Toggle sprint is not anything to worry about. When it recommends sprint, cancels reloading with sprint by default. Tap to search, I recommend that on, as if you open a chest, you want to complete that and not accidentally let go too soon. Toggle targeting, that's preference. Auto equip better items. Sure, you can have that on. Honestly, it doesn't really do a whole lot, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Aim assist, you want that on. Aim assist is super strong on Season 4. Reset building choice is actually pretty important for controller. I recommend you have that on. Keyboard, it doesn't matter because you're just going to press your key to instantly, click stair, click floor, so that's irrelevant. But for controller, it's really important because building is so slow. Already being on wall may actually help you build faster. Turbo building, you want that on, although note turbo building is very slow in this version. Auto material change, you want that on. Controller auto run, up to you. Then auto pick up weapons. I find this useful. It's going to be up to you to decide, is it worth it? It will clog up your inventory, but it'll help you pick up weapons quicker off spawn, so up to you. Vibration, I recommend you have vibration off, as generally I don't find vibration to help you. It's just going to shake your controller. If it's more immersive for you, by all means use it though. Record replays, I recommend, if you want better FPS, you should have this off. Okay, let's move on to, one more thing on replays though, replays may not always work also, so you can have it on. Test if replays are even working for you. If they're not, then just turn it off altogether. I just leave it on because the performance difference is not really noticeable for me, but if you have a low performance PC, you might want to have that off. Okay, let's move on to controller settings now. There are 4 options. Old school, quick builder, combat pro, and builder pro. Basically, just pretend old school, quick builder, and combat pro do not exist. You are only going to want to use builder pro. The problem with combat pro, which is the next best, is that you have to double click to go between stairs and walls like this. That's very unoptimal. It's much better to be clicking once to activate stairs, activate floors, that kind of thing. So overall, builder pro is where it's at. The problem is, builder pro is still quite unoptimal, honestly. It's just not, it's a decent control scheme, but it's not particularly good against custom binds. Currently, custom binds are not available. I'm trying to work with the developers to get that whitelisted, but it's just not available right now, so you're just going to have to deal with default binds. Let's kind of go through how I'd recommend you set it up for the 3 possible options. A normal control scheme, where you don't use claw or paddles, and you have to take your right thumb off the stick to press A, B, X, Y. A claw configuration, where you use your second finger to press these buttons, the face buttons, and then a paddle configuration, where you use paddles to click these buttons, which will mean you won't have to take your thumb off the stick. Okay, let's start out with a normal configuration. In a normal configuration, the best you can really do is, if you have an app like Xbox Accessories that may allow you to rebind your buttons, you can swap, say, B with down and left stick. If you use down and left stick to build, you can swap that around, and that may make playing a little bit more natural. It will be awkward though, because build and edit are on the same key. So overall, I really say that for a normal configuration, it's not really worth rebinding anything more than maybe putting one function on the down on the left stick. It's just going to be very awkward for you, and you're just going to kind of have to deal with it, unfortunately. I wish I could say there's some grand, workaround. There just really isn't, to be honest. But hopefully with a normal configuration, you don't actually change that many buttons, so you may actually find it not too difficult to use a normal configuration with Builder Pro. Moving on to Claw, it's a very similar deal, except with Claw, you can press these buttons with your second finger, which will be significantly better, and it will be a noticeable advantage. Same kind of deal, you can rebind maybe one button to left stick with an external app like Xbox Accessories, if that helps you, but if you had it on edit, you're going to be putting build there. That may be very awkward, so it's just kind of an unfortunate situation. One thing to note though, for both regular and Claw, is that sprint is basically useless when you have sprint by default, so you're free to basically unbind what's already here with just down the left stick. Finally, paddle configuration, you have a few more options. Normally with a paddle configuration, I set my paddles to be bound to the D-pad and put all my key functions like this stuff over here. The thing is, that's not going to work because you can't move them. So what I recommend you do is create another paddle profile and move your paddles to be on these face buttons. For me, I have one paddle for B, one paddle for X, and one for Y, and then I swap. I put down and left stick to be pressing A, which means I can jump with down and left stick, which feels more natural to me. It's not an ideal configuration. It's not perfect, But I think it'll help you in being able to get more used to these binds, as there'll be fewer changes if you move your paddles to act as the same function. So if you used upper left paddle for, say, reload, bind upper left paddle to X. That'll feel a lot more natural than keeping your paddle configuration to wherever they were before, and then having all your buttons, your functions being moved around. That'll be very awkward. So with that, I hope this video was useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.